Shout-outs. Time for the morning shout-outs. Shout-out Park Extension, who we all know is on the right side of that fence, by the way. Shout-out Park X. Shout-out everyone who hasn't touched their loved ones, their lovers, their friends in weeks. I haven't touched a person in weeks. And I'm lucky I have soft hands. Shout out Anjou. Shout out food delivery. Even the milkmen who are going around still delivering. Shout out to Hudson. I know people in Hudson who have donkeys. Where else can you find donkeys? Apparently Hudson. Shout out blonde women. Not so blonde anymore, are ya?
Unless you're friends with Miss Clara, who comes to my house regularly, and that's still permitted.
And a shout out to the Jewish General Hospital on the front lines. Working so hard. Also, I was born there. That's 2 for 2 in my books. It's the Big Five, everybody. Hope you are having a pleasant morning, as pleasant as possible. My one-woman audience One woman audience is Trudie Mason. Hi, Trudie.
Good Friday morning.
I'm so happy you're here for this. And on the line, I miss him. Talking about physical contact, I miss.
Yeah.
It's Egbert Gaye, the editor and founder of Montreal Community Contact. Hi, Egbert.
Hi, how you doing? I miss you guys also. How you doing, Trudie?
Very well, thanks, Egbert.
That's good. Shout out to the workers from the CLSCs across the island. All those CLSC workers who are day to day going like an army from house to house, making sure vulnerable people take their medication, have a proper meal, and everything is going good. Shout out to those CLSC workers also, Elias.
Egbert, I'm going to tell you something here because I know you got a fancy iPhone, which I helped you with. I helped you set up the Face ID. I'm going to FaceTime you this weekend. Okay?
You are?
You
Yeah,
better
please
answer.
do.
You better answer, okay?
Please do.
Mrs. Face. Okay, guys, let's get down to this. Do we deserve to see the modeling? Today, Ontario is going to release. Doug Ford, made a big point of this yesterday in his daily press conference that today, Ontario was going to release the quote-unquote modeling. You know those curves we've been looking at? You know, the curve in the U.S. that shows the best case, the worst case scenario, 2.2 million dead in the U.S. worst case scenario, those curves. Ontario's going to release a curve, okay? Yesterday, during the Prime Minister's press conference, he was badgered, man. The press was on him for why aren't you releasing your modeling and that kind of stuff? The Prime Minister's like, the modeling changes. It all depends on behavior. And to be honest, guys, I'm not so sure people want it. I know journalists want it. I know if I go onto Twitter, people are going to say, release the modeling. But do real people, the average person, do they want some dire death toll? Or maybe your opinion is they need this dire death toll for the last 15% of us who aren't listening. Egbert, I'll start with you. Do you want the dire protections? Can you handle the truth?
The last thing people want from government now is another layer of fear and anxiety. We have enough of that going around. Government has responded to that fear and anxiety by putting in place some universal basics. Wash your hands, social isolation, do the testing. That's one of the biggest deals in coming up with a projection. You have to test. Quebec is ahead of the game. Alberta and British Columbia, they're ahead of the game when it comes to testing. Ontario, which is last per capita in testing, that is how you're going to project. You need to know what's going on. They're last in testing, and they're talking about putting forward projections. What kind of projections? We have no clue what's going on with this coronavirus. Man cannot figure it out. The United Intelligence of Man could not figure out what's going to happen. We need to learn what's happening. We're still figuring out symptoms. We're still figuring out whether we should wear a mask or not wear a mask. Mm-hmm. What projections? They can't project anything. The government is doing the right thing. Justin Trudeau France, where they go, they're doing the right thing. They're walking slowly, and they're depending on science as we go along. But we're way behind this coronavirus. No, we are not ready for that. It's another layer of fear that's going to add to people's anxiety, and it could lead to draconian responses by government with police and army and all that silliness. You know what? Let's figure it out first, and then we can make projections. We can't be Donald Trump moving from one day he doesn't believe there's a virus to the next day saying this is the most ominous thing that happened to man. No. We don't need any projections. No, we need government to respond properly.
I'm sorry, Egbert.
And medical things.
I'm sorry, Egbert. The United States has Jared Kushner on the case. They're so well off. Trudie.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
You know, I know where you're coming from, Egbert, and my worry is to a certain degree that huge numbers would be discouraging for a lot of people, where they just throw up their hands and say, well, I'm going to get sick anyway. I'm going to die anyway. There's no hope, so why don't I go about my life? And, you know, and I get that, but this is my argument. You were talking about the police and the army and so on. Mm-hmm. At a time when Canadians are being asked to stomach quite stringent regulations limiting our freedom of movement and our freedom of association, I think we have to ask our government for the underpinnings for those directives. I think we need to see why they are, for example, telling cottage owners, no, you can't go up to the Laurentians to check on your property. That is a major limitation on your ability to move about this country and to tend to your business and your property.
You know where you should look for those answers, Trudie? Look at Italy, look at New York, look at Spain, look at Iran. Look at those countries if you want answers as why you shouldn't move, as why we should continue
lots of people would say, Egbert, that there is absolutely no harm in them driving up to the Laurentians, spending the afternoon checking on their property, interacting with no one and driving home, or even heading up there with 2 weeks worth of supplies and you know, kind of quarantining themselves.
The reason why they would say that, Trudie, is because they have no clue as to
the reason why they'd say that is because it's true.
They have no clue. We do not know. Government needs to tell us a little more and figure out the medical, figure out the technical, and then we can talk about what we can do or what we can't do.
I do think that any release of the projections has to be accompanied by a crash course in statistics. We're going to need a lot of background on this. We're going to have to understand how the numbers are compiled, what might change them. You know, I think it might be helpful actually to see three curves. Mm-hmm. This is
best, medium, worst.
If we do this, this is where it's going to be. But if we do this, well, you know, and so that we can see that our sacrifices are having a concrete effect. So, and I also think it would be helpful to take a look at numbers for all age groups. I've been saying this a number of times. There are certain demographic groups who are resisting the instructions more than others. And if they were to see, for example, that a certain percentage of hospitalizations involve their age category, that might shake them up. That might get them to comply.
Truly, the only way we can have accurate numbers is if we have proper testing capacities. We are behind the curve when it comes to proper testing. Ontario is last among all Canadian provinces.
Well, you know, here in Quebec,
he is the guy who's going to be talking about projections today.
Here in Quebec, we have a no appointment needed, drive up, walk up testing center where the wait now is apparently under a few minutes to get yourself tested. So I think here in Quebec, we can rely on our stats, providing those tests are being processed in a fairly timely manner. I would like to see some numbers. There is a risk, I acknowledge, but I would like to see some.
Absolutely.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
I don't know if we can handle the truth, everybody, but I will say this. You know, earlier in the week, like I said, they released those curves in the U.S., and the U.S. is still not under a nationwide lockdown and nationwide stay-at-home measure. There are still states that have not followed that course, even with the release of those dire projections. In Florida, in fact, they made special exemptions for religious services. So I'm not sure that doom and gloom actually works. By the way, we'll talk about this more. I'm getting a lot of feedback at 514-800 on the text line about if you want those numbers or not. And by the way, come this afternoon, Doug Ford in Ontario will release their projections.
The top stories in the city. The Big Five on the Elias Macco Show.
Non-essential businesses must close and gatherings must stop. If they don't, police will distribute fines and force people into isolation.
Back here on the Big Five, the voice you heard, of course, Premier Legault, with a much tougher tone on people that continue to skirt the rules. We heard a tougher tone as well from the mayor of Montreal, and of course the mayor will join us on this program at 10:30. Egbert Gaye is on the line. Trudie Mason is in studio as we dissect this, guys. You know, $1,000 to $6,000 fines. The question I have is, can you police your way out of a pandemic? And do you trust Montreal's police to not turn this into a reason to ticket the most disadvantaged people out there? Egbert, let's start with you.
You know, no, I don't trust them to walk a good line on this because it's unnecessary. There's no reason for the government to go into this direction as to imposing this quasi-militarization concept on people. Look, you're going to do this or you're going to pay $6,000. This is, you know, we're living through tough times. We're living through uncertain times. What we need is proper messaging from government. The government has been doing it properly as we move along over the last couple of weeks. But we can't all of a sudden turn this into a police or military response thing. And that's part of the problem with the projections that we were talking about before. We cannot police our way through this pandemic. We cannot police or militarize our way out of this. No, we need proper messaging. We need people to understand what are some of the fallouts if we don't isolate properly, if we don't practice social distancing. We need the politicians to stay the course and keep that message going, and that's the only way we're going to get through this. That's the only way. No need for police and heavy fines and threats and getting people scared. Another layer of fear here, money and uncertainties. No, it's the last thing we need, actually.
Well, apparently we do, judging from, the fact that police went up to that synagogue last evening on Bernard Street West and ended up writing up a report on an illegal gathering and sending it to prosecutors. It's actually not going to be the police who are going to be issuing the fines. We just had Andre Durocher on the air explaining that police are just going to write up the report and send it over to the Crown prosecutors, and it's going to be Crown prosecutors deciding whether people will proceed to be charged, and it will be a judge setting the fines. So I don't see a lot of openness for abuse by the cops because they're not going to have the final say. Yes, they can make your life difficult by sending the report off, but whether or not you end up getting charged is going to be in the hands of somebody else. Do we need it? I would hope that we don't. Apparently we do. I think we are going to have to accept that no matter how much enforcement we have and snitching we have, the isolation orders, the quarantine orders will not be observed perfectly. There are going to be defiant people in our community, in our society, who simply will not be told what they can and can't do, and they're going to find ways to get around this. And I think we're going to have to swallow that, as difficult as it is for all of us, including the healthcare workers who are going to have to deal with the fallout from that.
In this case, listen, most of the fines that we're seeing are coming from organized sort groups. We need to speak to community leaders. We need to speak to religious leaders in all communities. Let them know that we have to stay the course when it comes to social isolation. That's what we need. We can't act as if it's like widespread across the community. No, this is very specialized. Speak to those leaders and make sure they understand what the consequences are.
And I want, to me, it comes down to the question on how this is being done, right? So if you've got the city of Montreal saying, hey, we're going to put people in the parks, we want to remind people, we want to keep these parks open, but we need to remind people that it's got to be 2 meters. I mean, I think that's an approach that everyone can get along with. And there's no question that we need to do something about these gatherings like the one we saw last night,
Right.
and to get the message across.
You got to get to the top, right? You got to speak to someone at the top and let them know.
But they've been doing that, right? Like
well, the
that's
CJAD,
been the strategy.
the Federation CJA came out just a number of days ago and said, listen, pay attention to the warnings. There are no gatherings permitted. So if certain elements of a community, and by the way, it's not just one community.
There's
a number
whole
of,
bunch.
If you look at what's going on in the States, those big mega churches that are defined.
That's why I mentioned Florida. It's
hundreds of people in one room. Oh, social distancing maintained. Yeah, but you still got hundreds of people in one room. Come on.
Yeah.
I do think it's delicate, though, because what you're talking about there, in some cases, to very persecuted communities in the past, trying to limit their religious gatherings, it's a touchy subject, and I think you have to be careful about how to deliver that message. I do think it has to come internally to a large degree,
yes,
and not at the end of a billy stick.
Yeah, but it also has to come from community leaders.
Absolutely.
They actually have to be at the forefront of this. So if you're going to create situations where you're like, oh, you know what, come on, drive by, that's not a good message to send. Okay,
no, it's not.
I want to move on to Airbnb. I love this. Airbnb, okay? Everyone loves their Airbnb, right? You've been looking for an apartment in Montreal the last few years. Boy, you must love Airbnb. So Airbnb, their public policy director, wrote a letter to Canada's Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, requesting a whole bunch of government benefits be available to Airbnb hosts. They want those benefits that certain small business owners are getting, employees are getting, to apply to Airbnb hosts. They want GST fees to be deferred, like is being done for a lot of other groups. And to me, guys, this is so simple. Of all the industries in Canada, Airbnb already has a bailout program that's ready to go. Rent your units to long-term renters. If you have no money coming in, just put it back on the regular rental market. Should Airbnb get any type of special compensation or tweaking of the rules to benefit Airbnb renters?
They should get points for audacity. They are the most, like we would say in Caribbean, they're the most bold-faced group that you can come across. Look, here's the deal. This is a $31 billion company. The last valuation I saw was $31 billion. And they have money. They have gotten governments to move on regulations for short-term rentals across the world. You know, they have corrupted the housing market to the extent that so many people have been left on the streets, and they've been charged for discrimination and racism. This is not a nice company. This is not a nice company. To suggest that the government should give them some money now that things are a little difficult for everyone in the world, it's almost obscene. No, they shouldn't get a cent. And they should get a lesson in civics and their obligation to society. That's what they should get.
Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction, Egbert, was also the three-word answer, not a penny. But then I decided, no, I should really nuance that, because here in Montreal, they made an attempt to regulate Airbnbs, and they encouraged Airbnbs to register, for example, with that board that they had to register with, and come up and become legit. I think that if you jumped through all the hoops and you became legit, yes, you might argue that you can be part of a compensation program. Everybody else, not a penny. I'm sorry, you built what I consider an illegitimate business that harmed your community by reducing the amount of housing available. You got around all kinds of regulations that would normally apply to innkeepers and hotel owners. You were raking in the money and laughing at attempts to regulate you, and now you want the system to help you? Not a penny.
No way. And, that's a sort of fake legitimacy. Those who had to follow the new regulations that were put in place, they continue to sidestep what are the normal rental policies that we have here in Quebec. Listen, the point here is we have to understand that housing is a basic human right for any individual. And Airbnb turned that into a hassle. And we can't facilitate that.
And let's not forget, they can actually just put those apartments up for rent on the regular long-term market.
Absolutely.
And they will find takers in this city and basically every other city
Because the
in
vacancy
Canada.
rate is just like,
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. Okay, so 3-0 decision on that one. Let's see if we have another 3-0 decision here. But this is an idea from Quebec Solidaire. So if I'm going to go along with this, you know something's up. Quebec Solidaire is asking,
whatever it is.
Yeah. So they're asking for a freeze on interest fees on loans and credit cards, as well as overdraft fees. You know, when was it? It was over a week ago when the Prime Minister said something about credit cards and lowering interest rates in his daily briefing, and then nothing, crickets. You know, I don't find, even though the idea of credit cards is for short-term debt, right? And there's an argument, well, credit cards aren't supposed to be used for that anyways. But I don't see a real argument that at a time like this, a 20, 22, 24, 29% interest rate is acceptable at the time like this, right? When interest rates are at their lowest levels ever. I also don't like to get involved too much when it comes to the free market, but this ain't free market, folks. This is pandemic.
Yeah.
I think we do have to move here, right? And I think they haven't done it on their own. So I think we do need some legislation. And I'm not saying interest rates at 2% for credit cards. I'm not saying that. They're still credit cards. But I think we need to rein it in at a time like this. Egbert?
Apparently, the Prime Minister has been speaking with the banks and some of those credit card companies. They're not going to move. They've built a business model based on those heavy interest rates. They're not going to move. I think we need government regulations at this point, and it might be short-term regulations. It's not going to do anything to the bottom line of the banks and the credit card companies. They've already made their money. This is just their response, their contributions to this pandemic, and the government should force them to do it, and it would be right for everyone, in the province and across Canada. Get the credit card companies, get the banks to see their obligations in this crisis.
I think it's a little tricky. I've been hoping that the banks were going to step up. Trust banks, eh?
I know.
They came up with that defer your mortgage. They found a way to help you by screwing you, basically.
Yeah.
Defer your mortgage payments for 6 months. Of course, we're still going to charge you interest, so you'll have more to pay. At the thank you. But I was still hoping that banks would step up. Now I think maybe what they're doing is waiting for that order from the Prime Minister so that they can take it to their shareholders and say, listen, we have to do this. We have no choice. And that way they can save face with investors. I don't know, maybe. But a break on credit cards, that should only be for purchases after the pandemic started.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that might be more palatable for the banks.
Comrade Mason, thank you so much. Comrade Gaye, thank you so much.
All the best.
Read all of our latest columns in the next issue of the Daily Worker. And
Pravda.
Pravda, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Best,
Egbert, let me know what time I should FaceTime.
Call me anytime.
Absolutely.